this itself has a profound effect, or can have a profound effect, on our ability to see, to experience, and to really feel the goodness that we have. We let it slide, we don't talk about it, we just, like we said before, we take it for granted, and we don't highlight it. Yes, chances are we're going to minimize it. The more we talk about it, the more we highlight it, the more we make it into an issue, the more of an issue it will be. Okay?
What does that say about all therapy?
I'm sorry?
So what does that say about people going to therapy all over and, ventilating?
That's a very, very good question. So there are definitely times and places where it's necessary. Remember, we spoke in last week's class about the necessity when I'm struggling with something to talk to somebody. One of the ways to deal with it is to talk to somebody. So, but there is a limit to this. If therapy is there simply for the sake of just talking constantly over and over and over again, and by the way, we see people like this who they've been in therapy for the last 25 years, and they are absolutely, completely self-absorbed, like all they can talk about is themselves and their issues. You can't even have a conversation without it immediately turning the focus on them. So I'm not sure, I mean, again, I don't want to disparage any therapist because I don't know that it's the therapist's issue, but it isn't always the best thing. Just talking constantly about the problem, you got to get to some solutions, and you need, hopefully the therapist will move them in that direction. But, so I think that there's a balance. And again, we're not talking about necessarily we're surely not talking about any kind of clinical situation. So there is a need to get advice, to gain insight, get a little insight into myself, but to go on about it constantly. And I would hope, by the way, that one of the tools that therapists or anybody, friends, would use for one another is when somebody is down, not to discard or to disparage why they're down, but to also help turn the focus and say, and by the way, it starts with ourselves. We need to do this for ourselves. When I wake up in a depressed mood or whatever, it's important for me to learn to turn my focus onto all of those unbelievable blessings that I have, not on the squeaky wheel. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Okay. So, talking about it, not only does it take away the negative emotion, it can magnify that positive emotion. So in Judaism we have a built-in system that in a way forces us to pay close attention and to speak about the good in our lives. There are many mitzvahs and many rituals and customs that focus on this. One of a major mitzvah whose primary goal is for this is the mitzvah Bikurim. So the Jews were an agrarian society in Israel while the temples were standing, and there was an annual pilgrimage that was made by farmers, and the point of this was the first fruit was brought to the temple where they would bring an offering, but primary and very, very much central to the offering was the prayer that they said when bringing the offering. Let's take a look at this prayer and analyze it a little bit. Page 96, can I have a reader? Anybody? Please, go ahead.
The Arameans sought to destroy my forefather. He went down to Egypt and sojourned there with a small number of people, and there he became a great, mighty, and numerous nation. The Egyptians treated us cruelly and afflicted us, and they imposed hard labor upon us. We cried out to God, the God of our fathers, and God heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. God brought us out from Egypt with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm, with great awe, and with miraculous signs and wonders. He brought us to this place, and he gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Now behold, I have brought the first of the fruit of the ground that you, God, have given to me.
All right, so the average Bikurim bringer, the average farmer, was long in Israel for hundreds, if not 1,000 years. He doesn't remember his ancestors being slaves. He generally had a fine bounty. It wasn't like this was new to him. Every year this was recurring. He was able to feed himself and his family. And the fact that he was a slave, again, he was the furthest thing from him. The fact that they grew from 70 to thousands, again, this is something that happened long, long, long before he doesn't remember. Even the first farmers in Israel didn't remember that after 40 years in the desert. So the chances are quite high that any of these things, just simply taking stock of their situation on the most basic level, their freedoms, the fact that they have a land flowing with milk and honey, as they describe it, the fact that they're free, all of these basic things, these are things that would for sure go unnoticed. How often do we take into account the fact of how free we are here in America? Yeah, we take it into account when you go to Europe and you come back and you say, I'm back home, it's better here, in that regard. You go to a place or you read about a place, perhaps we think about it for a second. But it's something we take for granted. So this is a ritualized form of remembering it. And what is the effect of doing this? The Torah continues. V'samachta b'chol hatov, and this is text 10b. And you shall rejoice in all the good that God, your God, has given to you and your family. The implication is focused, and this verbalized gratitude, what it's saying is by verbalizing, by saying thank you, what is the result, says the Torah? That you will be happy. And what will you be happy with? It's not just, so first of all, it doesn't allow me to adapt to my blessings. I don't get too used to it. I don't take it for granted. And I don't let that positive emotion dissipate. I don't let it go away. I hold on to it. I magnify it. I keep it right up there in front of me and remind myself constantly about this. Although the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, the concept of Bikurim became eternal to Jewish life. And interestingly enough, the Medrash has a fascinating statement. The Medrash in text 11, it says that the prayers that we recite 3 times a day were instituted by Moshe, knowing that the temples would be destroyed and Bikurim would go away. So instead, we should give thanks every day 3 times a day. So in the times of the temple, they did it once a year, this Bikurim. And now, it's instituted to do it every single day, 3 times a day. That's quite a leap. And yet, this is how the Medrash describes it. That one of the primary purposes of Moses establishing the prayers is in order to be grateful every day. So we tend to think of prayer as asking for our needs. He says, no, the primary aspect of prayer is this idea of not letting all that we have get stale on us. We start this first harvest is something that we do every single day. The Modani Lefanecha, right? So what is the Modani? I thank you, living an eternal King, for mercifully restoring my soul within me. Your faithfulness is great. You did this yesterday, you're doing it again, and you did it 2 days ago, and every single day, rain or shine, you keep giving it back to me. This is something that we take for granted. And this is something that the first thing in the morning we say, don't take it for granted. And of course, many of you know that we even have a bracha when we're able to go to the bathroom. We make a bracha. I mean, it's a crazy thing. You go to the John, you make a bracha. And yes, anyone who has ever suffered in this area knows that it's absolutely something to be grateful for. And if, God forbid, something's not working just right, then you start to be thankful. Then there's thankfulness in a big, big way. So, but again, this idea of ritualized making a point to be thankful for the most mundane, banal kind of things, this is something that is instituted throughout all of Judaism. Take another example of the Modim Anachnu Lach. The only part in the whole prayer that in the repetition, aside from the Kedusha, which is a separate kind of thing, the only part of the repetition that the whole congregation joins again with the Chazan in saying is the Modim Anachnu Lach. How thankful we are for all of the good and everything that you do for us. So this is something, we talk about the daily miracles in the Modim. We're not talking about miracles like splitting the sea. We're talking about the daily miracles of being able to walk and talk and breathe. Those are the miracles we're talking about. the everyday miracles that we take for granted, the nature which is miraculous. And finally, the last example that we bring in 13a and b is the final psalm in the book of Tehillim, which we say every day as part of the morning service. We say, Kol haneshama tehalo ka. Every soul should praise God. And the word neshama can also be translated, and so it is brought down in the Medrash, al kol neshima uneshima. For those Hebrew speakers among you, neshama and neshima is interchangeable. One means soul, and one means breath. I praise you on every single breath that I'm able to take. Every breath that I'm able to inhale and exhale is another reason to give thanks to God. And I can tell you, I actually suffer from asthma from time to time, and I can tell you that when you struggle to take a breath, there is the absolute, you are thankful for every breath you take. And then quickly you forget about it. You know, when you're suffering and that kind of thing, you are thankful for every breath. And then, like all the rest of what we're talking about, you get used to it. Who thinks about breathing if you don't have a problem? Nobody. We take it for granted. Until, God forbid, we can't. And so this is some form of ritualized doing this. Okay. The word Jew, Yehuda, Yehudi, right? Everyone has heard the term Jew. Where does the term Jew come from? It comes from the word Yehudi. Hey, Jew. What is the word Yehudi? Yehudi comes from, it was one of the 12 tribes named Yehuda. Yehuda. It's the first offering of thanks for God's blessing was Leah when she has her fourth child. So there are 4 mothers, 4 matriarchs. There's going to be 12 tribes. And so Leah says, you know what? I got more than my portion. Each one of us should have theoretically only had 3 kids. And that would be 4 times 3 would be 12 tribes. Done. She has her 4th kid and she says, wow, this is already this is beyond what I expected. And she calls the child Yehuda. So when you think about it, the term Jew, the term Yehudi, connotes a human being, an individual, who is thankful. That should be, that ought to be, what the nature of a Jew is. Yehudi is somebody who is filled with gratitude and thanks constantly. Okay? Okay. So not only is Jewish tradition filled with thanking God for all the blessings, but Jewish tradition is also filled with the idea of thanking those messengers through whom God's blessing comes. And first and foremost among that is the commandment, of the 10 commandments, of Kibud Av V'Em, of honoring mother and father and mother. Why is this? What's the connection? So says the Sefer HaChinuch on page 101 and text 15, if somebody will read for us, please. Benny?
Among the foundations of the mitzvah of honoring parents is that it is proper to acknowledge and repay the kindnesses that one has received, and not be an uncouth ingrate. For ungratefulness is a dreadful character flaw that is an anathema before God and man.
So one of the foundations, there are many, many reasons given for the mitzvah of Kibud Av V'Em, but first and foremost, the most basic reason for this mitzvah is simply that our parents gave us life. They brought us here to this world. They may have even provided for us. Most of our parents provided for us for sure in our formative years, let alone all of the additional things. The emotional support, the psychological support, all of those things that a healthy parent-child relationship has. And even if it doesn't have those things, the very fact that they brought us here into this world, that alone is something that causes us, that puts a mitzvah, it places a commandment upon us for the rest of our life to give them respect and honor and thankfulness for bringing us here. We find the idea that even inanimate objects, things that have no feelings and no emotions, there's a tradition in Jewish thought that even those things we ought to be thankful for. So for example, we find by the 10 plagues that Moshe is told by God, strike the Nile. He's told, the Nile, what's the first one of the plagues? Blood. And then frogs emerge from the Nile. Moshe was not able to perform those miracles, those plagues. Why not? Because when he was a little baby, and the Egyptians were looking for all the baby boys, and he was placed in the Nile, and he was saved by the water. So he was not able to strike the water. This is how it's described. The Talmud tells us that the reason Moshe could not perform these miracles was because it would have been inappropriate for him. The Nile saved him. How could he turn it into blood? So obviously the Nile, it makes no difference to the Nile. The Nile's not going to cry out and then sue him, you know? But that's not the point. We're learning something here. We're being taught something here. There's a profound lesson about gratitude and thankfulness, even to something, to an animal, to an inanimate object. They also deserve our thanks. So there's this gratitude-happiness connection. I want to examine it a little bit more. Because gratitude is not only about being thankful for what we've been given, but it is also about being thankful to the one who gives us, to the giver of life, of stuff, of blessings. Let's take a look at this. So when a person builds gratitude in their life, the result is similar to the one who brings Bikurim, like we just described. He'll find happiness because expressing that happiness makes me more happy. It makes me more aware of the gratitude that I ought to feel. The very expression of it does it. So it's this cyclical thing which builds on itself. Let's take a look at 17a. Can I have a reader? Go ahead.
In 1998, my colleague Mike McCullough and I designed a program of research to examine the effect of a gratitude practice on psychological and physical well-being. In our first study, we randomly assigned to college student participants one of three tasks. They either briefly described in a single sentence 5 things they were grateful for, the gratitude condition, 5 hassles, the hassles condition, or 5 events or circumstances that affected them, events condition. Hassles are relatively minor, everyday stressful circumstances such as not being able to find a babysitter, dealing with the rising price of gas, doing laundry, misplacing one's wallet. The time frame for each of these was the past week. Participants completed these exercises along with a variety of other measures of health and happiness once per week for 10 consecutive weeks. The results were quite striking and garnered considerable media attention. Participants in the gratitude condition felt better about their life as a whole and were more optimistic about the future than participants in either of the other control conditions. To put it into numbers, they were a full 25% happier than the other participants. Those in the gratitude condition reported fewer health complaints and even spent more time exercising. Something as simple as counting blessings once a week resulted in significant emotional and health benefits.
25% happier. It's good. I like that number. Do one more reading if you don't mind. 17b.
One of the most effective ways to deepen your own gratefulness is to write a letter of gratitude to an important person in your life whom you've never properly taken the time to thank, and then visit that person to present him or her with the letter. What was the effect?
Preferably they're in a warm place.
What was the effect of composing and delivering the letter for those who participated in the experiment? When their moods were measured after 1 week of doing the assigned exercises, participants were happier and less depressed. This boost in happiness and decrease in depressive symptoms were maintained at follow-up assessments 1 week and 1 month later. It turns out that a gratitude visit is one of the exercises that made people lastingly less depressed and happier than any other positive psychology intervention.
Yes.
I wrote someone a letter who
exactly what they're talking about.
Yes.
You experienced this cycle, so it's not only that you were able to talk about your thanks, and now you were able to give thanks, which makes you feel also good. You gave the other person something to feel good about, which makes you feel better. So this cycle happens literally in 360 degrees. It keeps giving. That's the idea of this. Let's take the following two scenarios. We'll talk more about it in a moment. Let's take the following two scenarios. Learning exercise 2 on page 104. So Miriam needs $5,000 to help pay her daughter's college expenses. One day she stops at a local shop, buys a lottery ticket, and lo and behold, she wins $5,000. Mazel tov. Number 2, another scenario. Sarah needs $5,000 to help pay her daughter's college expenses. I want to know which college they're going to.
Yeah, right.
A member of her synagogue offers Sarah the $5,000 as a gift, or if she prefers, as an interest-free loan. Sarah, being well-educated and wise and a good Jewish woman, accepts the gift. All else being equal, whose good fortune will bring more happiness? I know we're going to get two opinions on this.
Getting a loan from a friend.
Getting a loan from a friend, why?
Feels grateful. Wow, that was really nice of that person to help me out that way.
Okay, so
She and Tate
So,
is
so, okay, so in other words, what we're talking about, one second, what Penny's describing is, so not only are we thankful and grateful that we have $5,000 in my pocket now to pay for college, that's great, but there's a degree of thankfulness in knowing that I'm loved, I'm cared for, I'm embraced, there are people out there who care, there's that sense of community, Janine, that you described earlier. There is a feeling of warmth, of